You're watching DCC TV.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Checking In at Your Library. I'm Barry Trott, Adult Services Director at the Williamsburg Regional Library, and for this episode we're going to be talking about crime fiction in translation. If you're following the bestseller lists, you know that Stieg Larsson's books, the girl with the dragon tattoo, the girl who kicked the hornet's nest, the girl who played with fire are hot items right now. Here at the library there's long hold lists for the books. And the movies are coming out and increasing the popularity of the books as well. And so I thought what we'd do today is talk about 10 other international crime writers, foreign crime writers whose books have been translated into English that you might want to enjoy if you're waiting on that holds list for Stieg Larsson and your number 342 for that book. So we're going to run through about 10 other folks you might find interesting, some of them from Scandinavia like the Stieg Larsson books, some of them from other countries. We're going to start off with probably one of my current favorites. This is an older set of books published back in the 1970s actually, but really formed the foundation for a lot of Scandinavian crime fiction. These are the Martin Beck novels by Maj Sowal and Per Wahlöö, two writers from Sweden. They're set in Stockholm. They feature the members of the Stockholm Murder Squad headed up by Martin Beck. These are sort of slower paced than the Stieg Larsson books. They're not so much thrillers, but great detective stories, very much about the interactions between the characters, between the members of the crime squad. The series starts with Rosanna. I have here The Locked Room, which is one of the middle books in the series. Rosanna's checked out right now. You do want to read these in order, though. I think you want to follow the progression of the development of the characters in order that way. There's a lot of talking here, some action, but a lot of talking, a lot of thinking about the solutions to the crimes, and very much looking at the idea of the social aspects of crime. What causes crime? What are the impacts, the effects of crime on a community, on a culture, especially in a culture like Sweden in the 1970s that thought of itself as very advanced, very modern, very forward-thinking, but still, as you'll see in the books, there was a lot of problems there with a variety of issues. So great stories, great characters. Really, as I said, if you've read any other Scandinavian crime fiction, Henning Mankell, people like that, these are really the folks who are the roots of that, and very much affected American detective fiction as well. So a great series. The series as a whole is called The Story of a Crime, and it covers 10 episodes, in a sense, over a series of a few years. So Henning Mankell and many other crime writers really come out of the roots of this, Maj Sowal and Per Wahlöö's Martin Beck series. Good starter. Jumping back a little further in time, I think if you look at the Martin Beck books as sort of the foundation for a lot of dark Scandinavian crime fiction, Friedrich Glauser, who was a Austrian-Swiss ancestry in the 1930s, can really be considered the dark bedrock from which the foundation of Scandinavian crime fiction springs. Glauser was a depressive morphine addict, spent some time in an asylum, and died at the age of 42. So not really the best record from a personal perspective, but he wrote 5 incredibly interesting crime novels featuring Sergeant Studer of the Swiss Cantonal Police. Studer, again, is a wonderful character. These are thoughtful, sort of psychological, philosophical crime mysteries. I think Glauser was very much influenced by the writings of his fellow countrymen Freud and Jung in the early part of the 20th century. The sergeant here is an interesting fellow. He was on the fast track to promotion in the Swiss police. Somehow, and you never find out in the stories what exactly happened, but somehow got caught up in some sort of controversy over a bank fraud case and was demoted way back out into rural Switzerland. serving as the policeman who is sent out on cases when no one else wants to do them, when it's sort of thought of as a hopeless case. So Studer is a resolute, an honest man, but he really he gets these cases that have dark edges that seem unsolvable, and he's usually able to unravel them mostly just by talking to the people. He talks to the friends and family of the victim. He talks to the criminals themselves. He talks to the witnesses, and it's mostly this idea of discussion and then moving from that to a certain level of action and solving the crime. The series starts with Thumbprint, which is a good beginning to the series. In this case, the death of a traveling salesman in a rural forest. Seems like it's an open and shut case, but when Studer gets there, he realizes there's a lot more going on to it, and so he follows through. Another one of my favorite writers of crime fiction, some of you may be familiar with, is Georges Simenon, a Frenchman. Over the period of let's see, what do I have my notes here, 1931 to 1972, Simenon wrote 75 novels and 28 stories featuring the French police Inspector Maigret. These have also been made into DVDs and to TV shows, so you can see them as well as read them. We have, if not all, certainly have the bulk of the collection here at the library. They are loosely in a series, but I think you can read them in any order you want. So this is one you don't need to start at the beginning. You can sort of dive into whatever happens to be on the shelf. One of my favorites is Maigret at the Gay Moulin, a French nightclub. In this case, two teenage boys develop a plan to rob a nightclub in France. They break in after hours, and what do they find on the floor but a dead body? And they're so scared of that they run off, leaving the body there. The next morning, the body shows up on the grounds of the local zoo, is stuffed in a wicker basket, and of course the boys, being the last ones to see the body there, are the prime suspects. But Maigret knows that often the prime suspects aren't the ones who really committed the crime, and so he again investigates. A strong sense of France here, a strong sense of place. There's a lot of eating and drinking in these stories, drinking especially. And so that really contributes to the sense of being there. You really get a feel for French culture, French life in the mid 20th century on up into the 1970s. Again, very psychological stories, sort of following in that, well, like the Stieg Larsson books, which, although they have a lot of action, are really psychological thrillers as much as anything else. And the same thing's true of Simenon's Maigret series. Very much a psychological sense of what causes crime, what causes people to do this. He's delving into those aspects as much as into the actual puzzle of the crime itself. Another French series that I think is worth mentioning, and perhaps a little bit lesser known, Jean-Claude Izo. Like Stieg Larsson, Izo is no longer alive, so unfortunately the books we have by him are all we're going to get. Izo wrote a series of books set in Marseille. The first one in that series is Total Chaos. The title of the book really reflects the theme in a sense. As the policeman who is the protagonist in the series says, Marseille is not a city for tourists. This is not the France of Paris and the City of Lights and Saint-Chapelle and the Louvre and Versailles and all that. Marseille is a dark city. There's really a feeling of hopeless desperation in a lot of the action of this book, and an inevitability to the violence. Like the Stieg Larsson books, these are fairly violent crime stories set in a bleak, somewhat hopeless atmosphere. Izo really explores the lives of the poor people who live in Marseille, of the conflicts between rich and poor, and particularly the conflicts that arise in this case in the lives of three men who knew each other as children growing up in a very gritty Marseille slum. One of them went on to become a policeman. The other two went on to really become involved in sort of the shadier aspects of life there. When those two men end up dead in what apparently are different circumstances, the policeman investigates and discovers that they were connected in ways he never could have imagined, and that their past history brings to an effect on the contemporary life, on the death of those two men. If you've read or seen Dennis Lehane's Mystic River, it's a similar story where three men who grew up together as adults now are dealing with the effects of crime in their lives. So great story, great character. Fabio Montale, the policeman one of the three who turned into a policeman. Is really an honest, ethical man who's trying to bring order and justice and mercy to some extent to a totally chaotic world. So not an easy book, not a light book by any means, but a wonderful story of three characters whose lives intersected off and on at different periods over the course of their lives. So good series, but a little dark. Another one, a series that I think offers a fascinating look at an honest and ethical policeman who's completely dedicated to his work, but working in a corrupt society, and not just a corrupt society, but a place that has a corrupt government as well, are Andrea Camilleri's Inspector Montalbano books. Montalbano works in a small, fictional small town in Sicily. Camilleri is from Sicily. So again, these books have a strong sense of place. Food plays a huge role in these books. Montalbano is a pretty decent cook. He enjoys his food. He eats out a lot, and there's luscious descriptions of food that will leave you hungry for lunch as well as for another one in the series. Montalbano is profane. These are not cozy mysteries by any means. There's rough language sometimes. There's rough action, but good stories. And I think that the most interesting thing is, again, that struggle against the corruption that seems to be pervasive through all levels of society in Sicily. It's he's an honest policeman, but there's too often rushes to cover up crimes, rushes to hide things. Of course, the mafia gets involved in things in some of the stories as well. The series starts with The Shape of Water. Again, just the mysteries can almost be secondary here to the character development and to the explorations, like in the earlier books I was talking about, the explorations of what causes people to do terrible things to other people. But wonderful stories, wonderful situations, wonderful location. If you like Donna Leone's mysteries set in Venice, the Guido Brunetti mysteries, which I believe I've talked about in one of the earlier shows that we recorded, I think you'll find a lot to enjoy in these as well. We don't want to ignore Scandinavia, since we did start off talking about Stieg Larsson, and so I think it's one of my favorite Swedish writers, and I'm not sure if she's still writing this series or not. We have 3 of them here in the library, but Helene Tursten's Detective Inspector Huss series, which starts with the book Detective Inspector Huss. These are set in the Violent Crimes Unit in Göteborg, Sweden. The writing is lyrical, clear, beautiful writing. It's a very interesting setting, that Scandinavian setting, and Tursten does a great job of capturing the cold, the darkness that's sometimes up there, and fascinating characters. Like in a lot of police procedurals, the interest here is as much in the interactions between the police characters as it is between the police and the criminals. You have here a woman in a what has up till now mostly been an all-male police department, so you have interactions there. I think that's fascinating to watch how Huss negotiates the challenges of working in what can sometimes be a very sexist group of men, or working with the men in the Violent Crimes Unit. There's also a lot of, and you start to see this even in the, back in the Martin Beck series that I talked about first, you start to see here a lot of interest in the personal lives of the police. And in this case, Huss is married to a chef at a high-end restaurant. That their relationship comes out, and they have 2 daughters who come in and out of the stories in some interesting ways, and it's fascinating to watch how Huss tries to balance her relationships with her family with the demands of the job. And there are certainly places where the personal worlds and the professional worlds intersect, as in one of the stories where one of Huss's daughters takes up with a skinhead music group, much to her parents' dismay, and much to the dismay professionally, because that particular group gets involved in some criminal activities. The series opener, Detective Inspector Huss, opens with a a wealthy and ambitious businessman plunging to his death from his apartment, and the investigation puts Huss and her colleagues in a lot of danger as the trail leads into fairly dark family secrets involving drug trafficking and motorcycle gangs. So again, a great series, 3 books in the series. If you like Stieg Larsson, you'll find a lot of similarities here, both in terms of the pace. They're somewhat fast-paced. They definitely have a little bit of a thriller aspect as well as the mystery aspect, and a great Swedish setting there. Not too many historical mysteries. We're not getting too many historical mysteries in translation, but we have one series that I thought was really worth talking about, and that's Boris Akunin's series featuring Erast Fandorin, who starts off as as you often find, as a police detective, and then in the later stories in the series, he's left the police department and is working as a private detective. But the Fandorin mysteries start off with the Winter Queen. They're set in the time of the Tsars in Russia in the late 19th century. And Akunin really does a great job of capturing this time with its vast bureaucracy, its decadent nobility, and its dire poverty. And he does a great job of painting contrasts between the very wealthy and the very poor, and showing how that sense of place really creates some of the conflict in the stories. These are great mystery stories too. If you like the puzzle mysteries of the golden age of crime fiction, you know, Agatha Christie's, the Dorothy Sayers, P.D. James, I think, writes to some extent those kind of stories now. Stories where the actual solution of the crime is as much of interest as the development of the characters. I think you'll find a lot to like in these, because Akunin has a great sense of timing, and his plots really rival those of the great mystery writers. Another interesting piece in these that really helps to set the scene, and I think also is interesting from us from a contemporary perspective, is that the seeds of the internal struggles that are going to lead up to the death of the Tsar and the establishment of the communist government in Russia that's still going on today and having an impact on the world are really being sown in these stories. In this particular one, in the Winter Queen, Fandorin is a new member of the Moscow Criminal Investigation Division of the Moscow Police, and he's sent to investigate the purported suicide of a wealthy young student. Well, as you know, as it turns out so often in these stories, the suicide was not suicide, and he's drawn into this deep web of political conspiracy that threatens not only the Russian government, but national issues and international issues as well. And there's a dramatic ending that sort of sets the stage for the next and the ongoing books in the series. I won't go into that because I don't want to give anything away, but it's a great story. There's a lot of excitement, somewhat of a unique setting, somewhat of an exotic setting. Russia in the late 19th century is a fascinating place. So, worth reading there. Boris Akunin's Erast Fandorin series. He has another series also featuring a nun as the main detective, which is sort of interesting. You might want to look at the Sister Pelagia books. One of the best-known writers, I guess, of literary fiction in many ways, but who also is considered a mystery writer, at least for this one book, is Peter Hoeg. These are Danish, set in Copenhagen. I was talking to one of my colleagues here at the library who's familiar with Denmark and Copenhagen, and said this book really is like it is there. He really captures the people, the culture, and the place of Denmark. Smilla's Sense of Snow is a dark and icy thriller set in contemporary Copenhagen. Again, strong sense of place, strong sense of cold and ice. The main character is a loner, Smilla Jasperson, who is a scientist who studies ice crystals and crystal development. And so there's this constant theme of coldness and ice running through the whole story. There's really a compelling mix of mystery, of philosophy, and a fair amount of science. You're going to learn a lot about the different kinds of ice here, but not in a pedantic way, not in a way that's anything other than fascinating, and a fair amount of action as well. Again, a somewhat violent story. Smilla has befriended, although she's very much a loner, befriends a young boy, a 6-year-old boy in her apartment complex, and knows that he, among other things, is terrified of heights. So when he is found having fallen from the roof of the apartment complex, she knows that he wouldn't have been up there for any other reason than something bad happening, and knows he didn't just slip on the ice and fall, because she knows ice. So she begins to investigate. It leads her to a very, very involved smuggling operation that has its roots back in the late post-World War II period, and a very violent finale on the ice in Greenland. I just refreshed myself with on this book yesterday in preparation for the program, and was reminded how exciting and how fascinating this story is. It's compelling, it's dark, it's icy, it's really wonderful. If you like Stieg Larsson, you should really go back and read Smilla's Sense of Snow. We've got a couple more here. One that was somewhat new to me, I just came across this a couple of years ago, and we're going to move from the cold and snow of Scandinavia to the steamy heat of the Copacabana region of Rio. Luis Alfredo Garcia Rosa has a series of books featuring Inspector Espinosa. The series starts with this one, The Silence of the Rain. These are complex, twisty plots. If you like really wondering what's going on, if you like an author who keeps you jumping, these are great. A fascinating thing about these books, excuse me, is their mix of third-person and first-person narration. So the story starts off with the first several chapters being narrated as you watch Inspector Espinosa going through his job. Then it shifts to his perspective, and you all of a sudden get him narrating the story, and it goes back and forth that way throughout the rest of the book. A very noirish feel here. This is sort of coming right out of the school of Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett, where you have that sort of moral person dealing with an immoral and corrupt society. And here the politics are corrupt, society is corrupt. Rio has immense wealth on the one hand and immense poverty on the other hand, and the conflicts that this disparity creates are at the root of many of the crimes in these stories. Again, a strong sense of place. Garcia Rosa obviously knows Rio, obviously knows the people, again, both the well-to-do and the people who are living in the slums and the favelas. In The Silence of the Rain, Espinosa investigates the shooting of a wealthy business executive in a Rio parking garage, an investigation that puts him and his colleagues in danger as well. So a fascinating story, fairly fast-paced, good thriller as well as great mystery, but really in this one, just incredibly appealing characters. And the series goes on, and it's again, well worth reading and a little bit warmer than the Scandinavian crime. I'm going to finish up with one that takes us from South America to Asia. The last book we'll talk about today in the show is The Hunter, the first book in the Takako Otomichi series, written by Asa Nonami. The setting here is contemporary Tokyo. Remember when I was talking about the Helene Tursten's Detective Inspector Huss books about the challenges facing a woman detective in an all-male police department? The same thing goes on here. Detective Otomichi is a female police detective. She's just moved from the motorcycle force. She loves to ride motorcycles. If you're a motorcycle fan, there's a lot of motorcycle riding in these books. You like to feel of the wind in your face and getting out on the bike. These books will have a lot of interesting things for you. But Detective Otomichi has been moved to the detective squad, where she's really not taken seriously. She's not accepted by a lot of the detectives who are already working there, the male detectives. She ends up paired with a veteran detective sergeant who is really skeptical of her, but they end up investigating a series of violent killings in sort of the seedy nightclub region of Tokyo. It's a very twisted, very complex plot. But fascinating characters. The setting is fascinating too. You know, if you are interested in Japan, in contemporary Japan, in Japanese culture and society, you'll find a lot about how people live as well. Again, the private lives of the characters are as important to the story as the police lives and the public lives, the detecting lives. So great setting, good characters, wonderful story. And a series I'm looking to get further into. I've just started off with this one when I was working on putting the show together, and I'm looking forward to the rest of them. So a quick look there at 10 international crime writers who've been translated into English. There's other ones here. We're always happy to help you find things at the library. Come on down to either of our buildings on Scotland Street in Williamsburg or out in James City County on Croker Road. You can also check us out on the web at www.wrl.org. You'll find lots of book lists, lots of other tools and things. You can access the library catalog there and place holds on things. If you need any help, you can IM us directly from the website, or you can call us here at the library at 259-4050. And this is Barry Trott saying thanks for checking in at the library.